No, I'm not going to be here when you get back, I said flatly, folding my arms as I leaned against the kitchen doorway. My wife, Tracy, paused in the act of applying her lipstick, turning to stare at me as if I'd sprouted a second head. What on earth do you mean? She asked, sounding more annoyed than concerned. I nodded toward the hall where her overnight bag sat neatly packed. You mentioned you'd tell me all about it later after your outing tonight. Well, I won't be here to listen when you get home, I replied, voice level. My heart was thudding against my ribs, but I refused to let it shake my tone. Tracy clicked the lipstick tube closed with a sharp snap. She stepped forward on her high heels, fixing me with an incredulous look. Where are you going, Jim? Out, I said simply. Somewhere that isn't here. I pushed off the door frame, already calculating how fast I could get out of the house before I said something I might regret. My hands were shaking with adrenaline and betrayal. She planted a hand on her hip, red nails gleaming. What's that supposed to mean, out? You're acting like a child right now, honestly. Grow up. This is the 21st century. Things are different now. Tracy tossed her hair as if that settled the matter. A bitter laugh escaped my throat. Different, huh? Maybe for you they've changed. Me, I'm the same man I've always been. The only thing different is a few more gray hairs. I stroked my short beard pointedly. You, on the other hand. I let my eyes drift over her stylish dress and the gleaming high heels she never wore for me anymore. She was still the same beautiful woman I married on the outside, but I hardly recognized who she was on the inside. You seem to have changed in ways that aren't exactly attractive, Tracy. She actually pouted at that, like I was the one being unreasonable. I have no idea what you're talking about. Oh, I think you do. My voice dropped to a steely calm that belied the chaos I felt inside. Let's review. 5 minutes ago, you told me you're meeting someone for dinner. A man. And when I politely asked who it was, you refused to tell me his name. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears, but I kept my tone almost conversational. That right there is a pretty big change, wouldn't you say? Tracy rolled her eyes. Jim, it's nothing, she snapped, waving a dismissive hand. I told you I love you more than anything. This has nothing to do with how I feel about you. It's just dinner. Just dinner, I repeated, tasting something sour in my mouth. With some guy you won't name. Just an exciting new experience, is that it? She crossed her arms tightly, the first hint of defensiveness creeping into her expression. It's not what you're thinking, I need a little excitement, okay? It was supposed to be a harmless night out. You can have nights out too if you want. Her voice took on a cajoling tone, as if this were a perfectly reasonable arrangement between modern spouses. I stared at her, amazed and disgusted all at once. Do you really expect me to be okay with this? I said quietly, not even phrasing it as a question. You really stood there in my kitchen and told me to my face that you're going on a date with another man, and I'm supposed to just smile and say have fun. It's not a date, she insisted, though her flushed cheeks and avoidance of my eyes said otherwise. It's just dinner and conversation. It doesn't change how I feel about you. Why are you overreacting like this? My jaw tightened. Overreacting. She thought this was an overreaction? I felt something snap inside me then. Maybe it was the last shreds of trust or the final strand of patience. I couldn't be sure. But I knew I was done standing here listening to her justify betrayal, as if it were a normal weekend plan. I'm not going to argue with you, Tracy, I said, eerily calm now. I grabbed my jacket off the back of a dining chair and patted my jeans to make sure my wallet and keys were in the pockets. They were. Do what you want tonight, but I won't be here for it. She blinked, finally looking genuinely shocked. As I turned on my heel toward the front door, she tottered after me on those heels. Jim, wait. Wait a second. I didn't wait. I was already across the threshold, stepping out into the cool evening air. Behind me, I heard the clatter of her heels as she reached the door. I pulled it closed, perhaps a bit harder than necessary, and strode to my truck parked in the driveway. By the time she swung the front door open and stepped out onto the porch, I'd fired up the engine. The V8 roared to life, a familiar comfort amid the chaos. I spared one last glance at her as I backed onto the street. Tracy stood in the porch light's glow, arms wrapped around herself, a look of shock and anger contorting her lovely features. She opened her mouth, maybe to call out to me, but I didn't stick around to hear it. My tires chirped against the asphalt as I accelerated away from the house, away from her and the so-called harmless night out that had just detonated my world. I drove off into the dusk, hands clenched on the wheel, heart pounding out a furious rhythm. I had no clear destination in mind, only a primal urge to get as far from that conversation as possible. The woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew, had essentially just told me our marriage vows were optional now, a quaint relic of the past. And she expected me to simply accept it. Not in this lifetime, I thought, chest heaving as I sped down our neighborhood street. Not ever. Tonight I discovered my wife was about to cheat on me, if she hadn't already. In that moment, one part of my life ended. But as I left my home behind in the rearview mirror, I already knew something else was beginning. A grim, determined resolve was taking shape inside me. I wasn't sure where I was going, but one thing was certain. I was done being played for a fool. Rallying the daughters. I didn't have to think long about where to go first. As I drove aimlessly through town, one hand steered while the other fumbled for my phone. I sent a quick text to my younger daughter, Samantha. Me. You home? Can I come by? Her reply bubbled up almost immediately. Sam, Netflix and chill, solo. You okay, Dad? She knew me well. I never texted late asking to drop in without a reason. I clenched my jaw and forced myself to type a neutral response. Me, I'll explain when I get there. See you in 10. Sam, of course. Popcorn and beer waiting. I managed a grim smile at that. Popcorn and beer. Somehow she knew I was in need of comfort food. Minutes later, I pulled up in front of Sam's small rental house across town. The lights were on, her silhouette visible through the living room window. As soon as I killed the truck's engine, I heard an excited bark. The front door flew open, and out bounded Duke, Sam's oversized Great Dane, galloping toward me like a runaway horse. Hey, boy, I greeted, as the tan behemoth nearly bowled me over on the sidewalk. 150 pounds of dog pressed against my legs, his tail wagging furiously as I scratched behind floppy ears. I exhaled slowly. Duke's innocent enthusiasm eased a fraction of the tightness in my chest. Sam appeared on the porch, arms wrapped around herself against the evening chill. Come on inside before Duke slobbers you to death, she called. I guided the dog back toward the house. Inside, the familiar, cozy clutter of Sam's living room greeted me. Thrift store furniture, shelves of old DVDs and video games, and the warm aroma of buttered popcorn. A Netflix show was paused on the TV. Sam had already laid out a bowl of popcorn and 2 bottles of beer on the coffee table. She gave me a quick hug as I stepped in. You scared me with that text. Everything okay? She asked softly. I swallowed hard and patted her back. Sam was 22, but in that moment, with worry creasing her face, she looked much younger. My little girl again. Not really, kiddo, I managed. We settled on the couch. Duke tried to climb up too, and Sam snapped her fingers, sending him off to sprawl on his dog bed with a grumble. I took a swig of the beer she handed me. It was some kind of citrusy craft brew I wouldn't normally touch, but tonight I barely tasted it. For a minute, we sat in silence except for the soft crunch of Sam munching a handful of popcorn, waiting for me to speak. The TV cast shifting colors across the room. I realized my hands were trembling slightly around the beer bottle. Dad, she said gently, you're really freaking me out. What happened? Did someone get hurt or… I let out a long breath. I hadn't cried. I was too angry to cry, but my voice still came out rough. It's about your mom. Sam immediately stiffened. Her green eyes, so much like her mother's, locked onto me. Mom, what about her? I tried to find an easy way to say it, but there was none. When I got home tonight, she was getting ready to go out, dressed to the nines. I asked who she was meeting. I paused to steady my voice. She basically told me she was going on a date with another man. Sam blinked, not comprehending at first. Then her eyes widened in shock. What do you mean, a date? Like cheating on you? No way. There has to be some misunderstanding. I wish there was. I gave a bitter half-chuckle. She told me not to wait up, that she'd explain everything later. She refused to even give me the guy's name, Sam. What? Sam's voice shot up an octave. I saw her face darken with anger and disbelief. Are you sure? She actually said that? I nodded slowly. Word for word, she said it's nothing, and that she loves me, and this doesn't affect her feelings for me. That I could go have my own… Flings, too, if I wanted. The words tasted awful coming out. Sam looked like she might explode. She set her beer down so hard some foam sloshed out the top. That is, are you kidding me? I just shook my head. For a second, we both sat there, letting it sink in. I could see Sam's emotions flickering across her face, confusion, disgust, fury. Finally, she jumped up from the couch. Give me my phone, now. I arched an eyebrow. Sam, I'm calling her, Sam seethed. This is total BS. I have to hear her say it. Before I could argue, she snatched up her phone and stabbed at the screen. She began pacing the small living room as it rang. I rose to my feet, heart hammering. Part of me wanted to grab the phone and hang up. I wasn't ready to hear Tracy's excuses, but this confrontation was inevitable. Duke lifted his head at the sudden tension, eyes following Sam as she stalked back and forth. I stood still, listening to Sam's side of the call. Mom, Sam nearly shouted as soon as the call connected, where are you right now? I heard a faint, tinny murmur of Tracy's voice but couldn't make out the words. Sam's face twisted. Who are you with? She demanded, voice ice cold. A pause. Whatever my wife said clearly wasn't the truth because Sam's eyes blazed. Really? That's funny because Dad is standing right here with me. I could imagine Tracy's response, probably surprise or scrambling for an explanation. Sam was having none of it. No, don't you dare try to lie, my daughter growled into the phone. You just lied to me, Mom. You lied to me. Her volume climbed with each sentence, hurt and anger leaking through. I cannot believe my own mother is lying to my face. I took a cautious step closer, ready to intervene if needed. Sam's voice was shaking. I don't care what you have to say for yourself right now, she continued, cutting her mother off. You lied, and you think it's okay to go on dates with random guys and expect Dad to just be fine with it? What the hell is wrong with you? Tears had gathered in Sam's eyes, but her fury held them at bay. Another muffled sound from the phone, then Sam's tone went deadly calm. No, you listen to me. I don't know how you're going to make this up to me or to any of us. Honestly, I don't even want to speak to you. So don't call me. Don't come over. If and when I feel like talking to you, I'll let you know. Goodbye. She jabbed the phone to hang up and threw it onto the couch as if it burned her. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the tick of the wall clock and Duke's soft whine. Sam stood rigid, staring at nothing, chest heaving. Then her shoulders began to tremble. In 2 strides, I crossed the room and pulled her into my arms. It's okay, Sammy, I murmured. Though nothing was okay. Her composure cracked. A sob escaped as she buried her face against my shoulder. How could she do this? She choked out. I don't understand. Everything was fine. She and you were fine, or so I thought. I had no answer. I just held her tight, my own throat constricting. My little girl was heartbroken and furious on my behalf, and on her own. After a minute, Sam sniffed hard and pulled back. She wiped her eyes roughly with her sleeve. I'm sorry, she muttered. I can't believe she would lie to me like that. You have nothing to be sorry for, I assured her. I gently brushed a strand of hair from her damp cheek. I'm sorry you even have to deal with this with us. She shook her head fiercely. Don't you apologize, Dad. This is her doing. Sam's expression hardened. I don't even know who Mom is right now, but I know whose side I'm on. Despite everything, despite the sickening churn of emotions in my gut, those words warmed me. I appreciate that, I said softly. I really do. Sam inhaled deeply, regaining some of her fire. We need to call Melissa. She deserves to know. Right. My older daughter, Melissa, needed to be brought into the loop. She lived across town as well, and given the late hour, she was probably out with friends or her boyfriend. But this couldn't wait. I'll call her, I said, reaching for my phone, but Sam was already on it, thumbs flying in a text. I just told her to get over here now, Sam said. Pretty sure I scared her. I wrote family emergency 911, come ASAP. Family emergency. That sounded about right. Our family was falling apart tonight. Less than 20 minutes later, Melissa arrived. I watched through the front window as my eldest navigated from an Uber to the door, wobbling slightly on her heels. She was dressed for a night out. Form-fitting dress, hair done up. When I opened the door, I caught a whiff of nightclub perfume and tequila? Melissa threw her arms around me in a tight hug. Dad, are you okay? What's going on? She demanded, words a bit slurred. Sam scared the crap out of me with that text. Sam hovered behind me, arms crossed. Mel, are you drunk right now? Melissa pulled back and held a thumb and forefinger an inch apart. Maybe a little tipsy. I was at Jenna's party having a good time until I got a text saying 911. So yeah, I Ubered straight here. She stepped inside, eyeing us both blearily. Now tell me what the big emergency is. Sam grimaced and nudged me toward the kitchen. Dad, why don't you put on some coffee? Strong coffee. I took the hint. Probably a good idea, I agreed. Melissa might need sobering up for this conversation. As I scooped coffee grounds into the machine, I heard the low murmur of the girls talking in the living room. Sam was rapidly filling her sister in on the situation, voice tight with anger and disbelief. I caught snippets. Mom went on a date, yes, with another man. Dad left the house. Followed by Melissa's shocked interjections. What? You're joking. Is this for real? By the time I brought a tray with steaming mugs of black coffee to the living room, Melissa was perched on the edge of an armchair looking sobered and ashen-faced. Sam had clearly delivered the news effectively. I set the coffee down and Melissa immediately grabbed one cup, taking a cautious sip. Jesus, Dad, she said quietly, looking up at me with wide eyes. I can't believe this. I sank back onto the couch next to Sam. Duke wandered over to rest his big head in Melissa's lap. Ever the empathetic hound. She absently scratched his ears. I wish it were unbelievable, I said, rubbing my temples. The adrenaline from earlier was fading, leaving behind exhaustion and hurt. But it's happening. Your mom decided she wants excitement, apparently. Melissa shook her head slowly, trying to clear the remnants of alcohol and the fog of shock. I just don't get it. You and Mom never seemed like… I mean, sure, you bicker sometimes, but not… She trailed off. Not this, I finished for her. No, I didn't see this coming either. Sam let out a derisive snort. Mom told Dad she finds her life boring, that she needs something more, and that he should just go along with it. The disgust in her tone was palpable. Melissa pressed her fingertips to her temples. She really said that. Pretty much, I muttered. She framed it like some modern marriage arrangement, like it's no big deal. For her, maybe, Sam spat, because she's lost her damn mind. Sam, Melissa gave her a cautionary look. What? Am I wrong? Sam fired back. Who does that? Who just announces they're going to cheat and expects us all to be fine with it? Melissa couldn't answer. She stared into her coffee. In the silence, I took a swallow of my own cup, scalding and bitter, but it helped ground me. Finally, Melissa looked up at me with a pleading expression. Dad, maybe this is some kind of midlife crisis thing for Mom. Like a phase. I know it sounds awful, but maybe she just lost her head a little. It might not last, you know? Sam's eyes flashed. Mel, are you seriously defending her right now? Melissa bristled. I'm not defending what she did. I'm just saying maybe it can be fixed. People have weird phases, especially at our parents' age. They freak out about getting older or feeling stuck. And they do stupid things. It doesn't always mean they want to throw everything away. Sam stood up and started pacing, every bit as agitated as she'd been on the phone with Mom. Shouldn't you be telling Mom not to throw things away instead of telling Dad to wait it out? She snapped. This is some grade A bullshit, Mel. You're acting like we should all just hold hands and sing Kumbaya until Mom comes to her senses. Melissa narrowed her eyes. I'm just trying to be practical. Do you really want them to split up over this one? Mistake? Mistake? Sam let out a short, bitter laugh. Calling it a mistake implies it wasn't intentional. She knew exactly what she was doing. Sam whirled to face me. Dad hasn't done a damn thing wrong here. Why is the burden on him to be patient? Hey now, I interjected, raising a hand. Let's all take a breath. The last thing we needed was the girls turning on each other. But Sam was on a roll. She pointed an accusatory finger at her sister. If you won't take a side, that's on you, Mel. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend Mom didn't nuke our family tonight. There's no both sidesing this. Melissa opened her mouth, anger flaring in her eyes, but I cut in before she could retort. Enough, please. My voice came out more sharply than intended, but it did the job. Both of my daughters fell silent looking at me. I sighed and pinched the bridge of my nose. I'm sorry. I know you're both upset. I am too, more than I can express. But fighting with each other isn't going to help. Sam pressed her lips together and muttered, "Tell that to Switzerland over there," under her breath. But she sat back down. Melissa frowned but held her tongue. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. The fatigue was really hitting me now. It felt like weeks since I'd last slept, though it had only been one awful evening. "Listen," I said quietly. "I love you both for caring so much. And I know you each have different ways of dealing with this. But I need you to hear me. What your mother did, I can't just ignore it." Melissa's eyes shone with tears she was fighting to hold back. "Dad, if she realizes she messed up and wants to fix it, would you at least try? Like counseling or something?" I looked at my firstborn, remembering how many times I'd promised her as a child that I'd always be there for the family, no matter what. Part of me ached to shield both my girls from this pain by magically restoring our family to normal, but I couldn't lie to them. "I honestly don't know if there's anything left to fix," I said, my voice heavy. "Your mother and I, we clearly don't want the same things anymore. Even if she woke up tomorrow and swore off any exciting side activities, I'd know she wanted them. She was ready to break our marriage vows for a cheap thrill. How am I supposed to forget that?" Melissa wiped at her eyes. "People can change back. She could regret it." "Maybe," I allowed. "Or maybe not, I can't read her mind, but I know myself. And I have my own self-respect to think about." I paused, choosing the honest truth. "Right now, I have zero trust in your mother. None. She basically told me I'm boring and that being married to me isn't enough for her. Even if she decided not to do anything, I'd always know she wanted to. I'd always be wondering if she'd resent me for holding her back from her fun." Sam murmured, "Dad deserves better than that." She reached over and squeezed my hand. Melissa sniffled, staring down at Duke, who gazed back with sympathetic big eyes. "I hate this," she whispered. "I don't want our family to fall apart." "Neither do I said, feeling my throat tighten. "But I also can't pretend everything's fine when it's not." We all sat quietly for a moment. The truth hung there. Divorce. Though none of us had said the word yet, it was looming in the air. Melissa finally broke the silence. "So, what happens now?" I rubbed my face. "Now, I need to cool off and think. Your mother wants to talk things out, I'm sure, but I'm too angry to see her right now. I might say things I'd regret, so I'm going to remove myself for a bit." Sam frowned. "Where will you go? You can't just sleep in your truck, Dad." "I'm headed up to the lake cabin," I replied. Saying it aloud solidified the decision. The cabin had been our family retreat for years, a simple two-bedroom place by Clearwater Lake that I partly built with my own hands. It was jointly ours, but Tracy rarely went up except during summer. "I'll crash there for the night, maybe a few nights. Clear my head." "You're leaving us to handle Mom?" Sam asked. I shook my head. "Not handling her, just I know she'll reach out to you too. You don't have to do anything you don't want to. If you choose to talk to her, that's your call. If you don't, that's fine too." Sam set her jaw. "I already told her I'm not talking to her and I meant it." Melissa looked uneasy. I think I should talk to Mom. Maybe tomorrow when she's calmed down. She sounded hysterical on the phone after you left, Dad. She called me crying and begged me to come over, but then I got Sam's text." I interrupted, stomach clenching. "She called you?" Melissa nodded. "Yeah." "She was sobbing and kept saying you left and she didn't know where you went. She asked me to come over to the house, but I told her I'd call later because I was on my way here." She gave a half smile. Sam's 911 sounded more urgent. "Mom's going to freak out when she realizes I know what happened." "That makes two of us," I muttered. I could picture Tracy at home crying and carrying on that I had gone too far by walking out. The thought made me both sad and angry all over again. Melissa reached out and touched my knee. "Dad, if she asks me tomorrow, do you want me to encourage her to, I don't know, get therapy or counseling? Something to snap her out of this?" Sam groaned. "Here we go." I held up a hand to forestall Sam. "Honey," I said to Melissa, "I appreciate you wanting to help. You can tell her whatever you feel is right. But as for me, I'm not making any promises." Melissa bit her lip. "Will you at least talk to her at some point? I mean, after you cool off a bit?" I sighed. I honestly don't know when I'll be ready to have a civil conversation with your mom, but I'll try, eventually, if only to get answers. Sam, who had been pacing again, came over and wrapped her arm around mine. Take all the time you need, Dad. She doesn't deserve a damn second of your attention right now if you ask me. Nobody asked you, Melissa said, though her tone was more fatigued than mean. Sam stuck out her tongue at her sister, then turned back to me. I'm coming with you to the cabin. I blinked. Sam, you don't have to. I'm not letting you sit out there alone, stewing in the dark. Her tone was final. I can crash on the couch or whatever. Duke can come too and keep us company. Right, Duke? She whistled, and the Great Dane lumbered over, tail thumping as if in agreement. I opened my mouth to object, but one look at her determined face and I knew it was futile. Truth be told, the idea of not being alone tonight was a relief. The thought of the silent cabin and my thoughts echoing off the wooden walls, maybe having my fierce, loyal daughter by my side would be better. All right, I conceded. Pack an overnight bag, and grab Duke's leash and food. We'll head out in a few minutes. Sam nodded and hurried off to her bedroom to gather her things. Melissa set down her empty coffee mug and rose unsteadily. I should head home too, she said softly. It's late. She hesitated, then added, I'm going to talk to Mom in the morning. Try to, you know, see what the hell she's thinking. I stood and gave my older girl a tight hug. Call me after you do, okay? Or if you need anything. She nodded against my shoulder. You two take care out there. And Dad, please don't do anything crazy, all right? I managed a dry chuckle. I'll try not to do anything too stupid. We walked to the door. Sam breezed back into the room with a duffel bag over her shoulder and a folded blanket for Duke. She overheard us and quipped, I'll keep an eye on him, Mel. No joyrides off a cliff or impulsive benders on my watch. Melissa mustered a tiny smile. Good. She gave Sam a quick hug. Don't kill Mom if she shows up, okay? Sam made a face. No promises. Sam. I shot her a warning look. She rolled her eyes. Fine, I'll be civil. But I'm not exactly speaking to her right now, so… Fair enough, I said. We all stepped out into the night air. The sisters embraced once more on the porch. I squeezed Melissa's shoulder. Text me when you're home safe. I will, she said. Her eyes glistened in the porch light. Love you, Dad. Love you too, kiddo. I stood there and watched Melissa walk down to the curb, where another Uber was already waiting for her. When she slid into the back seat and the car drove off, it felt like an era of our lives driving away with it. Sam gently tugged my sleeve. Come on, let's hit the road. It's a long drive, and Duke's already in the truck. Sure enough, Duke had bounded into the open door of my pickup and was sitting in the back seat, giant head hanging out the window impatiently. I grabbed the bag and blanket from Sam and stowed them beside the dog. Sam hopped into the passenger seat and buckled up. With a deep breath, I turned the ignition. The engine rumbled in the quiet street. Sam reached out and touched my arm lightly. We're gonna get through this, Dad, she said, voice firm. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As we pulled away from my younger daughter's cozy little home, I caught a glimpse of her profile in the dim dashboard glow, strong and resolute, looking so much like I must have looked leaving my own house earlier. Tonight had been hell, but at least I wasn't facing it alone. We drove into the darkness, heading toward the refuge of the lake cabin, not knowing what the next day would bring, only that we would face it as a family, fractured but unbroken. Abandoning home dawn crept over Clearwater Lake, turning the still water into a sheet of pale gold. I sat on the small dock behind the cabin, a lukewarm mug of coffee in my hands, watching mist rise off the surface. In the distance, a loon called, an eerie, lonely sound that perfectly matched my mood. I hadn't slept much. After arriving at the cabin the night before, Sam had managed to doze off on the couch, Duke curled at her feet. I, on the other hand, spent most of the night staring at the ceiling, thoughts churning. When exhaustion finally claimed me, I dreamed of being stranded in a sinking boat while Tracy stood on shore, watching impassively. I'd jolted awake before sunrise, heart pounding. Now the cool morning air helped soothe the jagged edges of my fatigue. I sipped the coffee and tried to think of nothing, to just breathe for a few minutes of peace. But of course, peace was fleeting. My brain wouldn't let go of yesterday's events. Scenes kept replaying. Tracy's casual confession, Sam's voice breaking as she yelled at her mother, Melissa's devastated face. The slam of a screen door pulled me out of my thoughts. I turned to see Sam walking down from the cabin, two travel mugs in hand. She had changed into jeans and a flannel, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Duke trotted ahead of her, tail wagging as if it were any ordinary morning. "Figured you'd be out here," Sam said softly. She handed me one of the mugs. "Fresh coffee. I put a little sugar in it since I know you like it that way." "Thanks, hun." I accepted the mug and gave her a faint smile. She settled beside me on the wooden dock, legs dangling over the water. Duke sat down on her other side, leaning into her warmth. We sat quietly for a moment, watching a pair of ducks glide across the cove. Sam leaned her head on my shoulder. "How'd you sleep?" she asked. I huffed a dry laugh. "About as well as you'd expect." "Me too," she admitted. "Kept waking up every hour." She hesitated, then added in a small voice, "Mom texted me at like 3 a.m. A long, rambling message. I didn't answer, but she said she's sorry, that she loves us, that she didn't mean to lie, she was just confused." I tightened my grip on the coffee cup, saying nothing. Sam sniffed. "Doesn't change anything. I'm still furious with her." I nodded slowly. "I know." She turned her head to peer up at me. "What about you?" I took a slow breath, gazing out over the calm lake. "Your mom wants to meet and talk today, probably to explain herself or apologize." I paused. "I don't know if I'm ready to hear it." Sam set her mug down on the dock with a determined thud. "You don't owe her that. Not yet. Not until you want to." I gave her a tired smile. "You're starting to sound like the parent here, you know." She shrugged. "I learned from the best." We sat in companionable silence for a while. Sam leaned her head on my shoulder again. "Are you going back to the house today?" she asked quietly. I flexed my stiff shoulders. "Yeah, I need to pack some more of my things. I only grabbed the basics last night. I need more clothes, my work boots, toiletries. Might as well take what I need for the next week or two." Sam frowned, concern etching her features. "Do you want me to come with you?" I pictured Sam standing guard while I faced Tracy in our home. As much as I appreciated the offer, I didn't want to put her through that. "No, I'll handle it. It's better if I do that part on my own." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Okay, but if she gives you any trouble, call me. I'll drive over and—" I held up a hand. "I'll be fine. I'm just grabbing my stuff and getting out. I don't plan on sticking around for a heart-to-heart." Sam studied my face and, seeing my resolve, finally relented. "All right. I still think you shouldn't have to face her alone, but I'll respect it." "Thank you." I squeezed her hand. "Why don't you head back to your place, take care of Duke's breakfast and whatnot? I'll meet you and Mel afterward, maybe around lunchtime. We should all talk once we know what your mom told her." Sam frowned. "Do we have to include Mom in our plans? I kind of don't want to see her." "No, I meant you and Melissa, not Mom," I clarified. "Maybe we can meet at your house and debrief or grab lunch somewhere quiet." Sam gave a resolute nod. "Okay, that I'm down for." We eventually gathered ourselves and went back inside. By the time we loaded up the truck, the sun had fully risen above the tree line. The clear morning sky belied the storm of emotion still swirling in all our lives. 50 minutes later, I found myself driving back into town on autopilot. Sam sat in the passenger seat, Duke's slobbery head resting on her shoulder from the back. Neither of us talked much on the ride. Our exhaustion made for a comfortable silence. Outside Sam's house, I pulled over to let her out. She insisted again that I call if things got out of hand, and I promised I would. Duke barked as if echoing her concern. I gave them both a reassuring nod and a wave, then watched until Sam and the dog disappeared inside. Now it was time to do what I'd been dreading and craving in equal measure, return to what had been my home, and truly cut myself loose. I drove across town toward the suburban neighborhood where the two-story brick house stood. The closer I got, the more my stomach twisted. Memories of happier times rose unbidden. Pulling into that driveway after work to find Tracy tending her rose bushes, or the girls playing basketball in the cul-de-sac. I had to remind myself that the warmth of those memories was now tainted by what she'd done. My jaw clenched as I turned onto our street. Her street, I corrected myself. I wasn't sure I could call it home anymore. Tracy's silver sedan was in the driveway, glinting in the morning sun. So she was home, possibly waiting for me. I inhaled deeply, steadying myself. There was no avoiding it. I parked at the curb and killed the engine. Almost immediately, the front door opened. Tracy stepped out onto the porch, spotting my truck. She was in her bathrobe and slippers, hair uncombed, a far cry from the polished woman who had left that same porch for her date last night. She looked pale and frantic. I climbed out of the truck but made no move to approach the house yet. I didn't particularly want another emotional confrontation on the lawn for the neighbors to see. "Jim!" Tracy called, her voice echoing down the quiet street. She hurried off the porch and started down the walkway toward me. My younger neighbor across the street, who was watering his lawn, suddenly found a keen interest in trimming his hedges, clearly eavesdropping. I felt a spike of irritation. I'd hoped to avoid a public scene, but no such luck. Tracy reached me, hands wringing together. "Thank God. Please, can we talk?" I held up a hand. "I'm just here to pack some things," I said loudly enough for any prying ears to hear. Without waiting for a reply, I headed for the front door, brushing past her. She trailed me into the foyer. "Jim, please, I don't want to do this on the lawn," I muttered, casting a pointed glance out the open door where our neighbor pretended not to stare. Tracy glanced that way too and flushed, then quickly closed the door behind us. We were alone in the house that, until last night, we'd shared. Now it felt foreign, like a stage set of my former life. "I just need to grab my things," I said briskly, striding down the hall toward the bedroom. She hurried after me. "You don't have to do that," she said anxiously. "This is your home too. We can—" "Stop," I interrupted, rounding on her. "Don't. Not after last night." She flinched. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Jim. I was wrong. I was stupid. We can fix this. I know we can." I shook my head and continued on. In our bedroom, I yanked open the closet and pulled out a large suitcase. The familiar sense of our shared life hit me. Tracy's jasmine perfume lingering in the air, the laundry detergent we both liked. It was a depressing, disorienting contrast. I loved her still, and I felt like I'd lost half my heart and soul, but I also couldn't see a way forward as things stood. Tracy hovered in the doorway, twisting her robe belt in her hands. "I don't want this," she pleaded. "I don't want a divorce. We can go to counseling, whatever it takes. Please." I didn't answer. Instead, I went to the dresser and began methodically pulling out clothes, jeans, socks, shirts, and tossing them into the open case on the bed. She followed me into the room. "Jim, please," she said, her voice cracking. "You don't even have to talk. Just listen to me. 5 minutes, please." I zipped the suitcase halfway, a week's worth of clothes piled messily inside. Then I turned to face her. She looked small and disheveled, eyes red-rimmed as if she'd been crying all night. Part of me, a deep, ingrained part, hated seeing her like that. But I steeled myself by remembering the casual coldness with which she'd ripped my heart out less than 12 hours ago. "You want to talk?" I said, keeping my voice low and controlled. "Fine, I'll give you 5 minutes, but I'm packing while you do." She nodded rapidly like a skittish bird. "Okay, thank you." I moved past her to the bathroom, collecting my toiletries, razor, toothbrush, medication into a small DOP kit. Tracy stood in the doorway, blocking my exit until I leveled a warning look and she stepped aside. Back in the bedroom, I continued packing shoes and personal odds and ends while she spoke in a rush. "I don't know what I was thinking," she began. "I wasn't thinking clearly. This isn't me, Jim. You know me. I've never done anything like this before. I panicked about getting older, about life passing by. And instead of talking to you, She wiped furiously at her eyes. "I made the worst mistake of my life." I paused, meeting her gaze. "Did you sleep with him?" Tracy blinked, caught off guard. She opened her mouth, closed it, then gave a tiny nod. "Yes," she whispered. "But it was just once. And it didn't mean anything. The second after, I felt horrible. I swear." I looked at her, this beautiful, familiar stranger, and felt something inside me break free. A strange calm overtook me. I think it was the exact moment love turned to something colder. "I'm done," I said quietly. "Tracy, we want different things. You may claim it was a mistake, but it wasn't an accident. It was a series of choices. You chose to betray me, to betray our family. I choose not to live with that." She broke into sobs, sinking onto the edge of the bed. "I choose you," she keened, voice muffled behind her hands. "Jim, I choose you. I love you. I stared down at her shaking form, the anger and hurt swirling like a storm in my chest. You already made your choice, I said softly. Now I'm making mine. With that, I grabbed my suitcase and left the bedroom. She followed me down the hall, still pleading through tears. I headed straight for the door. Outside, she tried to cut in front of me, one hand on the doorknob. Please don't do this, she begged. We can work through it. I love you. You love me. I know you do. I gently moved her aside and opened the door. Sunlight flooded the foyer. Across the street, our neighbor hastily redirected his attention back to his hedges. I stepped onto the porch, suitcase in hand, and turned to face my wife, my ex-wife-to-be. I did love you, I said, keeping my voice even, if not kind. But you didn't love me enough to stay faithful. So here we are. She made a choked sound, half sob, half protest. That's not true. I do love you. I've never stopped. I sighed, feeling exhaustion settled deep in my bones. I have to go, Tracy. She started after me. Where will you? Elsewhere, I said, echoing the word I'd used the night before. I walked to my truck and tossed the suitcase in the back. By the time I climbed into the driver's seat and started the engine, Tracy was standing in the driveway, robe fluttering around her, tears streaming down her face. I didn't trust myself to say anything more. I backed out slowly, pulled onto the street, and drove away without looking back. In the rearview mirror, I saw her shrink into the distance, crumpling to her knees in the driveway as I left. It was a depressing sight. I loved her, and I felt like I had lost half of my heart and soul. I just couldn't see a way forward. This time, I remembered to stop at the grocery store on my way to the cabin. That mundane chore took my mind off things for a short while, but the drive back along winding country roads brought it all back with renewed vigor. I turned on a podcast to distract myself, but by the time I arrived, I had no idea what it was about. I took my stuff into the cabin and set it down in a daze. It occurred to me that I should probably talk to my girls, but I was mentally and emotionally exhausted. I just didn't have the energy. As I stood alone at the silent cabin, one thing became clear. The life I'd known was gone, and there was no salvaging it. I still had to deal with the wreckage, but from here on out, I would do it on my own terms, and on my own side of the battlefield. Assembling the plan. It was mid-morning by the time I got back to Sam's house. She and Melissa were waiting for me in the kitchen, bleary-eyed but anxious to hear what had happened. We sat around the table, a box of pizza open between us. None of us was really hungry, but Sam had thought to order one anyway. Duke snored softly at our feet. Well, Sam prompted. How'd it go? I sighed and rubbed my eyes. I packed what I needed and left. We talked a little. Melissa and Sam exchanged a glance. And? Melissa asked gently. I took a sip of the coffee Sam had poured me. And nothing. She begged, she cried, she apologized. It doesn't change anything. Sam nodded firmly. Melissa looked a little sad, but not surprised. She did admit she slept with him, I added, the words bitter on my tongue. Jesus, Sam muttered, closing her eyes and shaking her head. Melissa reached over and squeezed my hand. I'm so sorry, Daddy, she said softly. I hoped maybe it hadn't gone that far. Yeah, me too. I mustered a wan smile for her. But at this point, it almost doesn't matter. The intent was enough. We sat in silence for a moment. I picked at a slice of pizza, mostly to give my hands something to do. Well, I talked to her, Sam began after a stretch. She glanced at Melissa, who nodded for her to go on. Mom called me like 5 times this morning. I finally answered once I saw your truck pull away. I let her explain herself. Sam rolled her eyes, if you can call it that. I sat up a bit, digesting that. And what did she say? Sam took a breath, as if steadying herself. You're not going to like it, she warned, echoing the very text she'd sent me last night. She set down her soda and ticked points off on her fingers. She told me she wasn't happy. Not with you, of course. Sam's tone dripped sarcasm. But with her life in general. She thinks it lacks excitement, challenge. Some jerk who owns a company she works with started hitting on her, and she liked the fact that he was pursuing her. Made her feel attractive and all that. I felt my jaw clench, but I let her continue. She said she wants to be able to go on dates. Sam almost spat the word. But she loves you and said you could go on dates too if you want. As if that made it all fine. I sat for a minute digesting her words. It was everything Tracy had already said to me, just in blunt summary form. Hearing it recounted by my daughter made it somehow even more infuriating. I ran a hand through my hair, then looked at Melissa. Quite the same story she told you? Melissa nodded slowly. Pretty much, yeah. Mom thinks it's just, I don't know, a phase that would have passed. She told me she never intended to leave you, just wanted to spice things up. Melissa made a face of mingled disgust and pity. Damn, Sam burst out, shooting her sister a look. You don't mind shit like this, Mel? Phase? Seriously? I didn't say I was fine with it, Melissa replied, defensive. I said I thought it wouldn't last long, that she'd get over it and things would go back to normal. I was dumbfounded. What do you advise me to do while she comes to her senses? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Melissa had the grace to look embarrassed. I don't know, she admitted. I hoped you'd maybe love her enough to be patient, let her calm down. Love her? Be patient, I repeated, a hint of incredulity creeping in. That's what she said to you? Yeah, Sam cut in, rolling her eyes. That's Mom's big solution. Dad should just love her and be patient while she, screws around and gets it out of her system? She shook her head. Rid? Culo. Well, what other options do you have? Melissa asked, a touch sharply. Divorce her? Lock her in a cage? I don't want our family to explode. I held up my hand, stopping the brewing argument. Girls, enough. They fell silent. I took a long breath. I'm divorcing her, I said quietly. I filed the paperwork this morning. Both of them looked at me with wide eyes. Sam's expression resolved into one of fierce approval. Melissa's into a sad acceptance. I'm sorry, Daddy, Melissa said, her voice small. Don't be, I replied. This is on her, not you. Sam nodded vigorously. Damn right. We laid out our plan for the coming days. I'd stay at the cabin indefinitely. Sam insisted on loaning me her old coffee maker and some extra blankets. The cabin was a bit drafty in winter. Melissa said she'd handle communicating with Mom about any practical matters like finances or mail, so I wouldn't have to. My heart swelled at their support. You two are something else, you know that? I said, voice a little thick. Sam smiled and nudged my arm. We learned from you, old man. Melissa ducked her head, wiping a tear. We just want you to be happy, Dad. Happy. That was a concept that felt foreign right now. But looking at my daughters, the two bright lights of my life, I felt a stirring of hope that someday, somehow, I might feel normal and whole again. Eventually, we cleared the mostly untouched pizza and decided to part ways for the day. Melissa had to go home and sleep off her rough night. Sam had a work shift later at the bookstore. We made plans to check in that evening by phone. As I headed for the door, Sam walked with me. Text me when you get back to the cabin, okay? And seriously, Dad, anything you need, call. I will, I promised. I gave her a hug and pressed a kiss to the top of her head. Thank you, Sammy. Love you. Love you too. Her eyes glinted with something like pride. You're doing the right thing, Dad. I nodded, hoping she was right. Then I set off, newly divorced in all but final decree, to figure out what the hell came next. That afternoon, I sat at the small desk in the corner of the cabin's living room with my laptop open and a mission in mind. A spiral notebook lay beside me, scribbled with notes. Tracy's employer, Randall Manufacturing, the names of a few supplier companies I'd heard her mention, any clues I could recall about who this other man might be. I started by logging into our cell phone account online. Because we shared a family plan, I could see a detailed history of calls and texts for both our lines. I navigated to Tracy's usage records, my pulse quickening. I wasn't proud of snooping, but at this point I had no qualms. If she was going to conduct an affair under my nose, I would happily dig up whatever evidence I could. It didn't take long. Immediately, an unfamiliar number jumped out. One with the same area code as ours, appearing again and again over the last few months. 555-04-3287. There were dozens of calls, many in the late afternoons and early evenings. Even more texts at all hours, some during the workday, some very late at night. Bingo. I copied the number into my notebook and then typed it into a search engine, enclosed in quotes. Sometimes you get lucky and a phone number shows up on a business website or social media profile. Sure enough, a result popped up. A cached contact page for Carson Industrial Solutions, with that number listed next to a name, Richard Rick Carson, owner. My blood ran cold. I knew that name. Randall Manufacturing's had a contract with Carson Industrial. Tracy had mentioned it a couple of times over the last year. Rick Carson, the jerk hitting on her, presumably. I sat back, chewing the inside of my cheek. So her lover, or whatever you'd call him, was Rick Carson, mid-40s, owner of a small industrial supply company. Married? I'd bet yes. I did a quick search for Rick's name on social media. A LinkedIn profile showed his professional details and even a photo. A square-jawed man with two white teeth grinning like he owned the world. I recognized him immediately. I'd met him briefly at a company holiday event 2 years ago. He'd been polite, forgettable. Now I felt my hand curling into a fist just seeing his face on the screen. Next, I searched Rick Carson wife. Within a minute, I'd found her. Linda Carson, courtesy of an old local newspaper blurb about a charity gala. There was a photo of Rick in a tuxedo with a pretty brunette woman on his arm. The caption helpfully noted they were married with 2 children. So Rick was married. Of course he was. These situations rarely involve just one broken marriage. My heart was hammering. I knew what I wanted to do. Expose the truth to this Linda Carson, if she didn't know already. Maybe it was vengeance, maybe it was solidarity, maybe both. Linda deserved to know what kind of man she was married to, just as I had deserved to know what my wife was up to. I realized I'd stood up from the desk at some point and begun pacing the length of the small living room. Duke lifted his head from his spot by the hearth, watching me curiously. I grabbed my phone and scrolled to a number I rarely dialed, my lawyer friend Mark. When he answered, I cut right to it. Hypothetically, Mark, a guy finds out the man sleeping with his wife is married. Does he have any legal risk if he tells the other man's wife what's going on? Mark let out a low whistle on the other end. Hypothetically, huh? Well, it's not illegal to tell someone their spouse is cheating. There's no law against sharing truthful information. As long as you don't threaten violence or anything, you're fine. I nodded, already certain of my next move. Thanks. Jim, just be sure. This can get messy. Already is, I replied. Talk soon, Mark. I hung up. I looked down at my notebook, at the scribbled name Linda Carson and a phone number I'd found for the Carson household via a quick white pages search. My hand hovered over my cell. I felt a flash of nerves. I was about to detonate a bomb in a stranger's life, just as mine had been detonated. But it was the right thing to do. I was increasingly certain of that. With a steadying breath, I dialed the number. It rang twice before a woman picked up. Hello, came a polite female voice. Hello? Is this Linda Carson? I asked. Yes, speaking. Who is this? I swallowed. Linda, you don't know me. My name is Jim Porter. This is a hard call to make, and I'm sorry in advance, but I have some information about your husband, Rick, that I think you would want to know. There was a beat of silence. What about Rick? She asked, voice cautious. I realized I was gripping the edge of the desk with my free hand. I discovered recently that he's been having an affair with my wife. A sharp intake of breath, then, defensively, I'm sorry, what did you say? I closed my eyes. Just do it. My wife is Tracy Porter. She works with Rick through Randall Manufacturing. I found out that they have been involved romantically. I'm sorry to drop this on you, but I thought you had the right to know. Linda said nothing for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice shook. This is a lot. How do you know? I laid out the evidence calmly. I told her about Tracy's confession, the phone records showing constant contact between their numbers. And even that, I'd pulled up a specific incident, last night at a club called Straps. As gently as I could, I told her, it started a few months ago from what I can gather. I have quite a bit of proof, and I can share it with you. Linda was quiet except for her breathing, which sounded unsteady. Then she said, yes, please. Send me whatever you have. I promised I would, via email or text, whichever she preferred. I could almost feel the shock and devastation radiating through the phone. It mirrored my own from not long ago. I'm so sorry, Linda, I offered sincerely. I know exactly how awful this is. I wouldn't have called if I wasn't sure. She let out a trembling sigh. No, thank you. Thank you for calling. I had a feeling something was off lately, but I didn't. God. Her voice broke on that last word, and it took all my restraint not to curse Rick's name out loud. I heard her compose herself. I'm going to have a very hard conversation with Rick, she said, steel creeping into her tone. And then I think a call to a divorce lawyer. I understand, I said softly. She sniffed. Mr. Porter, Jim, I appreciate you doing what you did, truly. I'm sorry for what your wife did to you. Likewise, I replied. For whatever it's worth, you're not alone in this. We exchanged contact info and hung up soon after. I immediately forwarded her screenshots of the phone log, highlighting Rick's number, plus a photo of one incriminating text I'd found. Tracy had in fact backed up her messages to the cloud, and I'd accessed a handful. One from Rick read, "Can't wait to see you again, babe." That done, I sat down heavily on the couch. My hands were trembling, but I felt a grim sense of satisfaction. The trap was set. The truth was out. Whatever happened next, at least those two adulterous lovebirds would face some consequences beyond what I'd personally dole out. Duke came over and laid his big head on my knee. I stroked his ears. "Good boy," I murmured, needing the simple comfort of his presence. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. I glanced at it. Melissa had sent a text. "Mom just called. She knows you told Rick's wife. She's furious." I sighed, a wry smile tugging at my lips. Of course, Tracy was more upset about me exposing them than about the affair itself. I typed back, "She can go ahead and be furious. Actions have consequences." I leaned back and closed my eyes. Come what may, I had done what I felt was right. Tracy and Rick might hate me for it, but they had only themselves to blame. A few minutes later, another message came in, this one from an unknown number. It was Linda. Confronted Rick. He admitted everything. "I'm done with him. Thank you." I sent a brief reply of support and left it at that. The quiet cabin seemed to exhale around me. It had been an eventful day of score settling. Legally questionable? Perhaps a shade, but morally, I felt oddly at peace. I thought of something my father used to say, "Do right by others and you can sleep at night." It felt like ages since I'd slept well, but maybe, just maybe, I'd find some rest tonight. The ultimatum, dinner. Exactly 1 week after I'd walked out of my house, I found myself facing Tracy across the small wooden dining table at the cabin. It was a strange mirror of all the dinners we'd shared over decades, yet entirely different. This was a meal served with a side of finality. In the days following our blow-up, I'd moved quickly. My attorney had filed the divorce petition at the courthouse 2 days ago. Tracy must have been served the papers because she blew up my phone immediately after. "This has gone too far, Jim," she'd cried over the phone. "Are you divorcing me? You have no reason to. What are you going to tell people? What are you going to tell a judge?" I had replied calmly. "I don't have to tell the judge anything, Tracy. That's what no-fault divorce means." She sputtered that I had no reason to do this, that we just had a disagreement. I countered that she gave me every reason I needed. In the end, she begged me to at least meet and talk once more before I made any irreversible decisions. "For the sake of 20-plus years together, please," she'd said. So here we were. One last conversation, one last chance for her to explain herself, or for me to confirm beyond doubt that I was doing the right thing. I'd prepared a simple dinner: grilled chicken, roasted vegetables, a bottle of Pinot Noir. I figured it would be easier to talk while doing something familiar like sharing a meal. Tracy arrived at the cabin looking equal parts hopeful and anxious. She wore a modest blue dress and light makeup, nothing like the flashy outfit from her ill-fated date night. If this had been any other evening, I might have told her she looked nice. But I wasn't about to start handing out compliments tonight. Now plates were served, glasses poured, and an uncomfortable silence settled as we picked at our food. Tracy was the first to speak. "I don't want a divorce, Jim," she said softly, eyes downcast at her barely touched chicken. I studied her for a moment. Despite everything, hearing her say that stirred a mix of emotions in me: anger, disbelief, and a flicker of the old love that still lurked in my chest, but I forced myself to remain composed. "What I don't understand," I replied, "is why not? After everything, why fight for a marriage you weren't happy in?" Her head jerked up. "I never said I wasn't happy in our marriage," she protested. I raised an eyebrow. You didn't have to use those exact words, Tracy. You made it pretty clear how you felt. She shook her head vehemently. No, you've misunderstood. I love you. I'm sorry I hurt you, but I promise I was happy with us. I just, I wanted more out of life, not a different husband. That's a pretty fine distinction, I said, unable to keep the edge out of my voice. In practice, more out of life translated into sneaking around with another man. You expected me to be okay with that. She winced. I handled it terribly. I see that now. But my feelings for you never changed. I love you and I want to spend the rest of my life with you, Jim. But why? I asked, genuinely perplexed. You've been married to me for most of our adult lives, and clearly it wasn't enough for you. Why insist you still want it? I I was confused, she said, twisting her napkin in her hands. I know it looked like I was dissatisfied with you, but I wasn't. I swear. I was going through some midlife thing. It had nothing to do with how much I love you. I took a long sip of wine, choosing my next words carefully. Tracy, a week ago, you stood in our kitchen and told me our marriage wasn't fulfilling your need for excitement. You outright said you wanted to date other men while staying married to me. How am I supposed to interpret that as anything but you being dissatisfied with me? Her eyes glistened. I misspoke. Or rather, I expressed it all wrong. I was never dissatisfied with you. I was dissatisfied with myself, my life. It was selfish, stupid impulse. You're damn right it was selfish and stupid, I cut in, my temper flaring briefly before I reeled it back. I drew a breath and continued more evenly. Look, you might genuinely believe you weren't unhappy with me. But from where I'm sitting, you sure didn't act happy. You don't nuke a perfectly good marriage because everything's wonderful, Tracy. She stared into her wine glass, blinking rapidly. I was wrong, she whispered. I see that now. I've given up on that whole idea. I told you I don't need other men or any of that. I choose you. I want us, Jim. Only us. I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms. You say that now. But even if I believe you've had a complete change of heart in 1 week, there's a bigger issue. I paused, searching her face. I don't want to be married to a woman who ever thought it was okay to do what you did. Tracy looked up sharply. It wasn't about thinking it was okay. I convinced myself it would be harmless. I was an idiot, but I would never have left you for anyone. I need you to know that. I gave a slight nod. All right. You wouldn't have left. But you would have carried on with this Rick or whoever came after him and expected me to live in blissful ignorance or tolerant acceptance. That's nearly as bad in my book. She reached across the table suddenly, taking my hand. Her fingers were cold and trembling. I am so sorry, she choked out. If I could take it back, I would. I'd do anything to rewind and make different choices. I gently removed my hand from hers. But you did make those choices, Tracy. You can't undo them. Neither can I. We sat in heavy silence. I watched a tear slip down her cheek, followed by another. This was agony. Part of me wanted nothing more than to wrap her in a hug and comfort her. But I steeled myself by recalling the image of her all dressed up and eager for another man's company. She wiped her tears quickly and cleared her throat. Is it really impossible for you to forgive me? She asked in a small voice. After everything we've been through, doesn't that count for something? My jaw tightened. Forgiveness and forgetting are two different things. Maybe in time I could forgive you, but I'll never forget. I can't pretend things could just go back to normal. Her shoulders slumped. I understand I broke your trust, but we could rebuild it with counseling or time. I'd be patient. I'd prove myself to you. I looked at her sadly. She really didn't get it. Tracy, you lost respect for me as your husband the moment you thought I'd ever go along with this. You might deny it, but when you decided I would be fine with an open marriage, that was you thinking very little of me. Some part of you thought I was a doormat. No, she protested, eyes widening. I never thought that. I was just what? Testing me? Trying to shock me? What did you honestly expect me to say when you announced your date night? Sure, have fun, honey? I shook my head. Either you had zero respect for my feelings or you vastly misjudged who I am. Either way, how am I supposed to stay married to someone who thought so little of me? Tracy opened her mouth, then closed it, at a loss for words. We had finished picking at our meals by then. The conversation had clearly overtaken any appetite for food. I stood and began clearing plates, mostly to have something to do and to signal that dinner and this conversation were nearing an end. She rose as well, following me into the tiny kitchen nook. "Let me help," she murmured automatically, reaching for the plates in my hands. "I've got it," I said, perhaps a bit too sharply. She withdrew, and I immediately felt petty for not accepting her help. With a sigh, I set the dishes in the sink. "Let's sit in the living room," I suggested. "It's more comfortable." Tracy nodded, trailing me to the couch. Duke, who had been dozing under the table throughout dinner, lifted his head at the movement. He watched warily from his spot, sensing the tension. We sat at opposite ends of the couch. The silence stretched, charged with everything left unsaid. Finally, Tracy spoke up, voice unsteady. "So that's it? You're really ending our marriage just like that? Even though I love you, even though I gave up that stupid idea and chose you, you still don't want to be married to me?" I looked at her, taking in her pleading eyes, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. This woman had been my partner through so much of life, raising our girls, weathering storms, sharing joys. A week ago, I couldn't have imagined sitting here preparing to let her go. But a week ago, I'd also never have imagined she could betray me like this. "Yes, Tracy," I said quietly. "That's exactly right." She flinched as if I'd slapped her. A fresh tear rolled down her cheek. "I gave up the idea and chose you," she whispered. "Doesn't that count for anything? Don't you want to be married to me?" I felt my throat tighten. "No," I said, and the word came out more gently than I'd expected. "No, I don't." She closed her eyes, a shudder running through her. When she opened them, they were filled with a mixture of anger and despair. She stood abruptly and walked over to the side table to grab her purse. "Let me know if you change your mind," she said bitterly, voice thick, and then she walked out the door without another glance back. I sank into the couch cushions, adrenaline draining out of me and leaving only hollow exhaustion. Duke patted over and rested his chin on my knee. I stroked his head, staring at the closed door Tracy had just exited through, perhaps forever. It hurt. God, it hurt. But there was also relief in it. The worst was over. No more waffling or tortured what-ifs. I'd drawn the line and held it. That night, I slept fitfully but with an easier conscience than I'd had in a long time. I dreamed of nothing. In the following days, the divorce churned through the court. Tracy's attorney made a half-hearted attempt to slow things down by asking the judge to schedule reconciliation counseling, as allowed by law when one party requests it. I flat out refused. My lawyer conveyed to the judge that no counseling would change my decision. Given the circumstances and Tracy's own lack of protest by then, the judge didn't push the issue. Tracy tried to come to the cabin twice more in that period, but I had the good sense to change the locks and keep the doors deadbolted. I ignored her knocking and calls to just talk for a minute. One time, she even showed up at my auto shop. I had to firmly escort her outside and tell her she wasn't welcome at my workplace. By about 2 months in, she gave up and, through Melissa, agreed not to contest anything. She just wanted it over, and so did I. The settlement we reached was straightforward. We sold our suburban house and split the proceeds. I kept the lake cabin. She didn't want it anyway, too many memories. We divided assets without much acrimony. Honestly, I think she was too emotionally drained to fight over material things. She didn't ask for alimony. Hard to justify when she was the one who blew up the marriage, and she knew I had evidence of plenty of her affair if it came to a fight. The last time I saw Tracy in person was at the final divorce hearing. We spoke only through our attorneys that day. In the courtroom hallway, waiting for our case to be called, she looked over at me once, perhaps hoping for a smile or some sign of regret. I offered nothing, and then it was done. Our 23-year marriage dissolved with the strike of a judge's pen. She walked away with her head down, and I walked the other direction. No reconciliation, no last-minute change of heart. Just two lives separating, each to follow its own uncertain path. Setting the trap. True to her nature, Tracy didn't let go of the idea of us easily in those early weeks. When reason and apologies failed, she even tried flashes of anger. Word got back to me, through our older daughter, that she was furious I'd told Rick's wife everything. In one of the last phone conversations Melissa had with her, Mom apparently railed that I had no right to ruin Rick's life too by informing Linda. When I heard that, I just shook my head. Tracy still didn't get it. None of this would have been happening if she and Rick hadn't ruined their own lives first. I never spoke to Rick Carson directly after exposing him, But I did receive a surprise visit from him one evening at the auto shop, not long after my dinner with Tracy. It was closing time, the garage bay doors already down. I was in the office finishing paperwork when the side door opened and Rick walked in, uninvited. He looked like hell, unshaven, eyes bloodshot. Before I could even speak, he launched into me with a low, venomous tirade. "You bastard," he growled, jabbing a finger at me. "You just couldn't keep your mouth shut, could you? You had to go and blow up my family, too." I felt a slow burn ignite in my chest. I came out from behind the desk, taking a measured step toward him. "Consider it a public service," I replied coldly. "Your wife deserved the truth. How dare you come in here and try to make me the bad guy, Rick?" He sneered, getting up in my face. I could smell stale whiskey on his breath. "You think you're some kind of hero? You ruined my marriage, my relationship with my sons. You ruined those things," I snapped, finally losing the calm veneer. "I just turned on the lights to show what was already there." Rick's face contorted. He grabbed the front of my shirt, bunching it in his fist. For one surreal second, I almost laughed. Was this idiot really trying to fight me here in my domain? He swung, a clumsy, rage-fueled hook. I stepped back nimbly and he stumbled past me. Fueled by months of betrayal and righteous anger, I planted a solid elbow between his shoulder blades as he lurched, sending him sprawling against the tool chest with a loud clang. Before he could recover, I grabbed him by the collar and slammed him up against the wall, forearm across his throat. "Don't test me," I growled inches from his face. Rick's bravado evaporated in an instant. Fear flickered in his eyes as he realized I physically had him at my mercy. I let him go and stepped back, breathing hard. He straightened his jacket shakily. "To hell with you, Porter," he spat, but the effect was ruined by his trembling voice. "I lost my company, did you know that? My board voted me out. Bad PR, they said. Linda's taking half of everything. Are you happy now?" I pointed to the door. "Get out," I said quietly, "before I lose my temper." He glared, opened his mouth as if to retort, then evidently thought better of it. With a string of muttered curses, Rick Carson slunk out of my shop, out of my sight, and out of my life. I never saw or heard from him again after that. As the winter wore on, things settled into a new normal. I lived alone at the cabin with Duke, who seemed to think he'd won the lottery having me as his full-time companion. Work kept me busy during the days. Evenings were quiet, but not unbearable. Sam and Melissa checked in often, and I found solace in small routines. Chopping wood for the fireplace, listening to old records, tinkering with a classic motorcycle engine I'd been meaning to restore. I thought I'd feel lonely, and sometimes, sure, a wave of loneliness would hit out of nowhere, but far more often, I felt strangely at peace. The drama was over, the lies were done. I woke up each morning knowing exactly what reality I lived in, and there was value in that simple truth. By the time spring arrived, our divorce had been finalized for a couple of months. Tracy and I communicated only as necessary, about taxes or about selling the house. It sold quickly to a young family. I silently wished them more happiness under that roof than we'd ultimately had. The girls maintained a relationship with their mother, but it was undeniably changed. I think they saw her through a more critical lens now, and while I hoped they'd eventually forgive her and heal, I also understood their hurt. For my part, I'd forgiven Tracy in a way, if forgiveness means letting go of bitterness. I no longer woke up angry. I no longer went to sleep replaying the betrayal over and over. It had happened, and it was done. I wanted nothing from her, and that, I think, freed me. One warm April afternoon, I found myself driving into town with the windows down, Duke's head hanging happily out the passenger window. I pulled up to a little cafe, where I was meeting Sam and Melissa for lunch. As I settled at a patio table, sipping iced tea while I waited, I caught myself smiling at nothing in particular. It struck me. I was happy. Not over the moon ecstatic or anything, but truly quietly happy in a way I hadn't been in a long time. I thought back to something Tracy had said during our last talk. "Why should it be a choice between you and random dates with other men? If it's a choice, I want to be married to you." That line had stuck with me, especially as I discovered a new kind of contentment on my own. She wanted freedom and stability, but ended up with neither. I chose self-respect over compromise and, unexpectedly, found a better sort of stability on the other side of chaos. I didn't know what the future held. Maybe I'd meet someone new someday, maybe I wouldn't. I was okay either way. My life was far from over at 46. I had my health, my livelihood, people who loved me. That was more than enough to build a satisfying life. Sam and Melissa arrived, interrupting my reverie with a flurry of hugs and chatter. They were full of plans for summer, including dragging me on a trip somewhere. "Dad, you need a vacation like a real one," Melissa insisted. I chuckled and promised I'd consider it. As we ate and laughed under the spring sunshine, I realized something. The dark, heavy chapter of my life that began with that shocking discovery was well and truly over. And I'd come out the other side not just intact, but stronger. Tracy and Rick had lost nearly everything in their pursuit of fun. Me? I lost a lot, yes. But I'd regained my dignity, my peace of mind, and the freedom to decide what comes next, on my terms. In the end, I had come out on top exactly as I vowed I would on that first night when I drove away from her lies. Quietly, almost gratefully, I tightened the last screw on that chapter of my life and turned the page. A new horizon awaited, and I was ready to meet it head on. A new horizon. My first holiday season as a divorced man could have been a gloomy affair, but my daughters had other plans. They conspired to drag me out of my comfort zone, insisting we do something different for Christmas. When Sam emailed me a flight itinerary to Aruba, with my name on the ticket, I almost laughed it off. Me? On a tropical vacation? Not likely. But the girls were persistent. "You need this, Dad," Melissa had urged over the phone. "Sunshine, a change of scenery, maybe even some fun." I could hear the gentle challenge in her voice. Fun. That thing their mother sought so selfishly I'd practically sworn off, but maybe they were right. Which is how I found myself on a white sand beach on Christmas morning, toes dug into warm sand, a pineapple cocktail in hand. Sam and Melissa splashed in the turquoise surf nearby, waving for me to join. I smiled and waved back, content to watch. It was paradise. And damned if I didn't feel a decade younger in this place, under a tropical sun with nothing to worry about for a whole week. I couldn't remember the last time I'd truly relaxed. On our third night, the resort hosted a salsa dancing event by the pool. Colorful lights twinkled in the palm trees, and a live band played lively Latin rhythms. My girls dragged me along, of course, and I went good-naturedly. I was an awkward dancer at best, but watching Sam and Melissa show off moves they'd learned from some YouTube video was a hoot. I was standing off to the side, nursing a beer, when I noticed a bit of a commotion on the far end of the dance area. A petite woman in a flowy sundress was politely trying to fend off a man who was clearly 3 sheets to the wind. He was being persistent, and she looked uncomfortable. Before I knew it, I'd handed my beer to a passing waiter and strode over. "Everything okay here?" I asked lightly as I approached. The tipsy man frowned at me. The woman gave me a quick, hopeful look. "I'm fine," she said softly, her accent a melodic Spanish lilt. "This gentleman was just leaving." "Ah, we were just gonna dance," the drunk slurred, reaching clumsily for her hand again. I stepped between them with a calm smile. "Hate to interrupt, pal, but I've got our next dance." The guy blinked blearily. "You who?" The woman seized the opportunity. She slipped her hand into mine and moved closer to me. "He's my husband," she lied smoothly, giving the man a pointed look. "And I'm done dancing tonight." A flash of something crossed the drunk's face, embarrassment maybe. "Oh, my bad," he mumbled. With that, he staggered off in search of another target. The woman let out a breath and withdrew her hand from mine. "Gracias," she said, switching to Spanish in her relief. Then, catching herself, she added in accented English. "Thank you. Some men don't take no for an answer, huh?" I chuckled. "Unfortunately, some don't. Glad I could help." Up close, she was stunning. Glossy black hair, deep brown eyes, a mischievous smile now replacing her earlier discomfort. And she appeared about my age. Not that I was looking. She extended a graceful hand. "I'm Nita." I shook it gently. "Jim." From the corner of my eye, I could see Sam and Melissa gawking at me and this beautiful stranger from their spot by the pool. They looked positively gleeful. I did my best to ignore them. "So, Jim," Nita said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, "are you really a dancer, or were you just playing the hero?" I grinned. "Mostly the hero part, I'm afraid. My dancing skills are questionable." She laughed, a warm, throaty sound. "Well, the music has slowed down now. Even questionable skills will do." She nodded toward the band, which had indeed transitioned into a slow bolero tune. Was she inviting me to dance? I realized with a slight start that she was. I offered my hand with an exaggerated flourish. In that case, may I have this dance, mi esposa? I teased. Nita's eyes sparkled at my use of the Spanish for my wife. Es, she said, playing along. But keep those wandering hands respectful, marido. My daughters would never let me live this down. But I couldn't remember the last time I had flirted like this. It felt good, natural. We moved to an open spot on the poolside dance floor. I placed one hand at her waist and she rested hers on my shoulder. Our free hands joined and we began to sway gently to the music. So, Jim, she said softly, what brings you to Aruba? I chuckled. Two overly concerned daughters. Her eyes widened. Those two lovely girls who keep staring at us? Those would be the ones, I confirmed, shooting a faux stern look toward Sam and Melissa, who instantly pretended to be very absorbed in their own dancing. They insisted I join them for the holidays. Nita smiled. That's sweet. I'm here on a self-holiday. My gift to myself, you could say. We swayed in silence for a moment. The tropical night air was thick with frangipani and sea salt. Her dark eyes searched mine. I noticed you said daughters. No mention of a wife. I felt surprisingly at ease answering. Divorced. Recently. A flash of sympathy but no pity crossed her face. I'm sorry. I'm not, I said and found I meant it. Nita nodded in understanding. I'm a widow, she offered. Also recently. So, I get it, in a way. We continued moving slowly, her body fitting comfortably against mine in the most innocent of ways. It was, perhaps, the first truly peaceful, happy moment I'd shared with a woman since before everything went wrong. And it was with a stranger I'd known for 10 minutes, on an island far from home. The irony wasn't lost on me. Tracy had searched for excitement outside our marriage and ended up with nothing. I had searched for nothing and somehow stumbled into this lovely moment. The song ended and another began, but we didn't rush to part. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my girls discreetly high-fiving. Nita saw it too and laughed softly. They are very happy to see you dancing, I think. I shook my head, chuckling. They're a bit invested in my social life. Smart girls, she quipped. Then releasing me, she gave a little curtsy. Thank you for the dance and the rescue. See, or my pleasure, I replied. We left the dance floor and rejoined my daughters, who wasted no time getting to know Nita. Within minutes, they were all chatting like old friends about everything from the best snorkeling spots to the merits of margaritas versus mojitos. I mostly listened, marveling at how easily Nita fit in, as if she had always been part of our circle. When the night wound down, I walked Nita to the edge of the resort's courtyard where the path split toward our respective villas. The girls had gone ahead, giving us not-so-subtle winks. Nita turned to me under the swaying palms, the sound of waves in the distance. Thank you again, Jim. Tonight was unexpected. And fun. I smiled. It was. Maybe we could do something tomorrow? There's a catamaran tour to the reefs. I hear it's great. Her face lit up. I was planning to go to that. Yes, I'd love to. Great. I found myself a little breathless, like a teenager asking his crush out. I'll, meet you in the lobby at 9? It's a date, she said brightly. Then, with a playful peck on my cheek, she slipped away toward her villa. Good night, hurry, woo. I stood there for a moment, the tropical breeze ruffling my hair, feeling an unfamiliar flutter of excitement in my chest. It was nice. It was also undeniably simple and pure. This feeling didn't carry the weight of decades of history or heartbreak. It just was. As I headed back to my room, I realized my daughters were peering out from their terrace, grinning ear to ear. I rolled my eyes and laughed. Don't say a word, I called up to them. Sam put her hands up innocently. We didn't say anything. Melissa just sang a few bars of Kiss the Girl from The Little Mermaid, sending Sam into giggles. Yeah, they'd never let me live it down. But I didn't mind. The rest of the trip was one of the happiest stretches of time I could recall. We snorkeled with Nita. We drank and danced and built sandcastles, at Sam's insistence. We rang in the new year on the beach, fireworks reflecting off the water. And when it came time to leave, I felt a genuine pang of sadness. At the airport, as my daughters browsed souvenirs, Nita and I promised to keep in touch. She lived in San Diego, not terribly far from me by plane, and we both knew this wasn't just a vacation fling. I discovered in a short span that she was clever and kind and a little bit wild in the best way. You're a good man, Jim Porter, she told me as we parted at the gate. Maybe my good man, she added with a wink that made me flush like a kid. I surprised myself by responding, I hope so, and meaning it. We hugged tight, and I realized I hadn't been this reluctant to let go of someone in a long, long time. My phone buzzed as I boarded the plane, a text from Nita. Safe flight, Bezos. Yes, life can turn on a dime. A year ago, I'd have scoffed at the notion I'd be eagerly planning a visit to see a new woman I'd met on a Christmas trip. But here I was, texting Nita a silly selfie of Duke and me with an hasta luego caption, and grinning like a fool when she replied with heart emojis. I looked out the airplane window at the receding Caribbean landscape and gently shook my head at the wonder of it all. I thought of Tracy, not with anger, but almost with a sense of gratitude. By destroying our marriage, she inadvertently shoved me toward a new path, one that led to genuine happiness. Tracy sought bright colors and excitement outside our vows, but found only ashes. I, on the other hand, held my line, weathered the storm, and eventually stumbled into my own bright colors. Unexpected, untainted, and all the more vivid for the darkness that preceded them. A few months later, on a balmy June evening, I found myself down on one knee on the dock of my lake cabin, holding out a ring to a teary-eyed Nita. Fireflies danced in the dusk around us as I asked her to marry me. Sam and Melissa watched from the shore, Melissa quietly sniffling happy tears, Sam practically vibrating with joy. Nita laughed and cried at the same time as she said, Es mi amor, por supuesto que es. Yes, my love. Of course, yes. And threw her arms around me. As I slipped the ring onto her finger, a cheer went up from my daughters and maybe a bark or two from Duke. I held Nita close, feeling the steady, joyful thump of her heart against mine. No ambiguity, no doubts. I'd come out on top and I'd found someone who valued me as I valued her. In a way, Tracy inadvertently gave me this gift. By freeing me from a life where I was undervalued, she made room for one where I'm cherished. Later that night, under a star-filled sky, Nita and I joined my girls around a crackling bonfire by the cabin. We roasted marshmallows. We made plans for the future. Nita was moving east to be with me. I'd already put the cabin up for sale so we could start somewhere fresh in the city. There was laughter. So much laughter. At one point, I caught Sam watching me with a soft smile. What? I asked, nudging her. Nothing, she said, wiping a bit of marshmallow off my chin. Just, I told you things would get better. I pulled her into a one-armed hug. You sure did, kiddo. As the fire burned low, I took a moment to look around at the faces illuminated in its warm glow. My two beautiful daughters, my stunning fiancée, Nita, even Duke contentedly snoozing at our feet. This was my life now. A little bit messy, a little bit crazy, but full and true and brimming with hard-won happiness. I wouldn't change a thing, not even the pain that led me here. With a grateful heart, I leaned over and kissed Nita's forehead. She beamed at me, eyes shining with the reflection of firelight and future dreams. The long night that was my past had finally given way to a bright new dawn. And standing there surrounded by love, I was ready, truly ready, to step forward into whatever tomorrow held, hand in hand with the people who mattered most. I had tightened the screws on fate, and fate, it seemed, had rewarded me in kind. The horizon ahead glowed with promise, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be.